live in a landscape of huge change: pandemic, disruptions, lockdowns, new economies. Sometimes we may even question, how is the gospel relevant to the world of such immense changes? I submit to you that the gospel of Jesus Christ is more needed today than before because while many things change, there are four things about people that do not change. The first is that people cannot find truth in God on their own effort. Thousands of years ago, the gospel changed the Roman Empire and the known world at the time. As the gospel spread throughout the world, people recognized that the gospel that had a loving God was such a positive change to society. But even back then, there were people who resisted the gospel despite its positive impact. Why so? Paul writes, "In their case, the God of this world has blinded the minds of the unbelievers to keep them from seeing the light of the gospel of the glory of Christ, who is the image of God. For what we proclaim is not ourselves, but Jesus Christ as Lord, with ourselves as your servants for Jesus' sake." People cannot find truth on their own because there is a spiritual blindness that befuddles their best efforts. And this is true today. Despite all the inventions, online resources, increased education, even at their best, people cannot find God. They need God's work through the gospel to open their minds. Which leads to a second insight. People need the person of Jesus Christ to discover real truth. There is a lot of knowledge today, more than ever before, and it should have led us to an utopian enlightenment. But it has not. Society is still cracked, divisive, and polarized. Today, people are worn out, resigned and weary by the amount of knowledge and the divisiveness it brings in society. Jesus described such a weariness upon people's spirits. And because lawlessness will abound, the love of many will grow cold. But he who endures to the end shall be saved. And this gospel of the kingdom will be preached in all the world as a witness to all the nations, and then the end will come. Hard facts and truth alone may not change people's hearts. It is the discovery that at the center of truth is a person, the Creator God, who holds truth together, who loves us and wants us to know Him. Truth in the midst of a relationship with God is that which changes hearts. The gospel is needed because there is hope in its power to change. And this is because, thirdly, people are made in the image of God. The Bible tells us, "So God created human beings in His own image. In the image of God, He created them, male and female. He created them, and then God blessed them." Scientist Blaise Pascal said, "There is a God-shaped vacuum in the heart of each man, which cannot be satisfied by any created thing, but only by God the Creator, made known through Jesus Christ." Poet Khalil Gibran wrote, "When you work, you fulfill a part of Earth's furthest dream, assigned to you when the dream was born. When you work with love, you bind yourself to yourself and to one another and to God. Work is love made visible." There is something inside people that God has put there to resonate with God ideas and draw them towards God. Even scientists, poets, and mathematicians attest to. And that is why there is hope that the gospel of Christ can open hearts. However, fourthly, people need the work of the Holy Spirit for sustained change. When people are open to God, they face many resistance in their desire to grow in God's ways. This resistance is multiplied if we hope for positive, godly change in the landscape of today's pandemic, polarization, and cancellation. Sustained change in community is a result of perseverance and positive choices in individuals. The Straits Times newspaper in Singapore published a letter of the week that wrote these words: "While many clamor for and even demand transparency over pandemic measures and vaccine safety from the authorities, I think it is just as important as responsible individuals to take personal effort and action to strengthen our own immune system, which, after all, is totally in our own hands." While this letter referred to the strength of physical immunity, the principle is true too for the strength of social immunity. People need to take personal effort and action to do and sustain what is right for the whole of society in the midst of pandemic, polarization, and cancellation. For long-term godly choices in societal change, the work of the Holy Spirit in individuals' lives is indispensable. That's why Paul writes, "The Spirit helps us in our weakness, for we don't know how to pray the way we should, but the Spirit Himself pleads on our behalf with groanings too deep for words, and the one who searches hearts knows exactly what the Spirit is thinking, because His pleadings for God's people according to God's will." Through our challenges and individual weaknesses, if we hope for positive outcome in society, the gospel and even more, the work of the Holy Spirit is needed. We need to share the gospel with power, bringing the Holy Spirit into the lives of people. I submit to you that these four things about people do not change even amidst a rapidly changing landscape. And that is why the gospel of Jesus Christ must be the torch that is carried by the church today. What can God's church do for the gospel amidst this changing landscape? I suggest two approaches. Firstly, reinvent the gospel in today's ideas and illustrations. God's message never changes, but the methods must always change. We need people to think like evangelists and missionaries where they are at. Marketplace, you're working in music, in business, in schools, in your neighborhoods, bringing timeless gospel truths into today's new ideas and illustrations. How can the ideas of atonement, sacrifice, love, sin be illustrated in a culture of pandemic, polarization, and cancellation? Secondly, as the church, angle your abilities towards evangelistic impact. When I was younger, after multiple tries at personal evangelism with failure, I pondered on my abilities, and one of my passion and gift is in preaching. So I sought to angle preaching towards evangelistic impact by learning how to illustrate and challenge in evangelistic settings. To date, I have seen more people respond to altar calls in evangelistic settings than I would in multiple lifetimes if I stuck only to personal evangelism. I know a doctor, who desires to reach his patients with the gospel. He is one of the best surgeons in the region. Though swamped with work, he takes the time in between clinical visits to spend more time with each patient to talk and connect with them. And through the time, he offers to pray for them after he has gotten to know them better. He feels that surgery heals the body, but Jesus heals the heart. And he finds it particularly meaningful when encouraging and praying for patients who are depressed and have lost hope. I know a lady who was a bank manager but is a very people person who felt she was not fully fulfilling her calling. And after much time of soul searching, she decided to take up a job to be trained as a school counselor to engage students in their vocation search and crossroads. She felt that she could be a better witness for Christ flowing through her people relational personality in this way. So how can you angle your God-given abilities towards evangelistic impact in your setting? What are your natural abilities in communication, help, strategic insight, problem solving, caregiving, etc.? How could they be angled today for evangelistic impact to people and networks around you? How could you read up, discover, and grow their evangelistic potential? Now, not everyone needs to be an evangelist. But if the natural wiring of every church member is angled, channeled, refined towards evangelistic impact where you are at, then I believe we would have an evangelistic church relevant for our times. Would every believer rise up? Would every evangelist and pastor rise up? Would every church rise up to bring the gospel in power, enduring yet relevant to the landscape of changing times today?